All right, so today I want to talk about GLP-1s, things like Ozempic and Wegovy. They've been around for a couple of years now. I think culturally, people are pretty familiar with them. A lot of people, millions, I think, of Americans are on it currently. And first thing I want to say is this is something you're considering or something you think about. Please consult with a doctor first. This is something you're going to want to do with the doctor's supervision. There are side effects you have to watch out for. There are things you'll need to monitor, things you need to measure. And anything like this that has potential, benefits and risks, there are ways to get it online and ways to do it in clinics that are, out for money more than they're out for your health. So please, if you do think this is something you're interested in, consult the doctor. And don't consult me, right? I'm just giving you my opinion based on what I understand, but I am by no means a doctor or a chemist. So please, if this is something you're interested in, talk to a doctor first. So a lot of people in the fitness industry bemoan these drugs and look down upon them. And to just be super upfront, I do not share that feeling about them. There is this sense that if you're taking this drug, then you are relinquishing your personal responsibility for your actions and for your health. And there's an element of that I understand and that I partially agree with, right? You do have to be in charge of your health and in charge of your actions, and you do have to modify your behavior to become healthier. I think we all agree with that. But the thing that this drug fixes or helps, fixes is probably a strong word, are your hunger hormones. So your ghrelin, your leptin, and your insulin sensitivity. So one of the main reasons people lose weight on this is, yes, it makes you not want to eat as much because it's adjusting these hormonal ranges so you're not as hungry, and that when you do eat, you get full much easier. And it improves your insulin sensitivity. So when you do eat, your blood sugar stays lower, which helps you burn more body fat. So I can go into that in much more detail in a different video, but at a basic level, that's what it does. That's how it helps you lose weight. So a lot of these hormones get dysregulated throughout your childhood and your teenage years and when you're going through puberty and stuff. And while I do agree with the personal responsibility angle, so much of that gets ingrained in your system before you've even had a chance to do much about it. And what I mean by that is when you're a kid, you're sort of at the control of what your parents give you. And I know a lot of people, I've had a lot of clients that grew up in a very unhealthy home where candy, snacks, chips, cereals, cheap, poor products were completely the norm for them growing up. And this stuff just regulates all of those hormones. And repeated exposure to foods like this, to high processed foods, and there's a study that just came out talking about, ultra processed foods and what it does to your health and your hormones and cancer risk and health risk and all that stuff, that's just equating all of this to exactly what I'm saying. So much of that is happening while you're young and it's out of your hands, or you're at the behest of what you're given. And culturally, we use food as reward. We use food to comfort sadness. We use food to treat a lot of psychological problems. So you develop a lot of bad habits anyway, but it's also playing a long-term role and wreaking havoc on all these hormones. And then the insulin part, you're seeing type 2 diabetes in younger and younger populations. And a lot of that has to do with what's going on in your childhood, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're bad or you're making bad choices, which you are, but so much of that has been done to you while you're young. And to try to fix that now is so much harder. So the things that these drugs do, I'm a big fan of because it fixes a lot of the stuff that could have been done to you, and not in a mean way, but just parents that don't understand health, or parents that maybe don't have the resources or don't have the understanding to try to provide you with better choices and provide you with a better psychological balance with your food, right? I mean, I grew up eating some of this stuff too. It just, as the years have gone on, it's become more and more processed. So it's become harsher and harsher to your health and to your hormones. When I was a kid, it was a little bit better for you. It wasn't quite as processed, quite as bad, but now there's, high fructose corn syrup in everything you eat. So these drugs help re-regulate all of that stuff. Now, what that doesn't do is absolve you from the behavior changes you need to make while you're on the drug, because while this is sort of a band-aid solution, it will re-regulate all of these hormones while you're using the drug. But if you do not make the changes throughout the course of your treatment, it will not maintain the re-regulation of these hormones. So it might improve from where it was when you started, but it is never going to completely reset to those things that would have been, neutral when you were a kid before they got disrupted. So on the whole, I am a coach that is very pro GLP-1 agonist, in the sense that it can help fix or temporarily improve a lot of the things that were not necessarily caused by you during your childhood. Now, what you see a lot of times is people that start these drugs, treatments, whatever word you want to use for it, and don't modify their behavior. Well, they still might get results from it because they're going to be a little less hungry. They're going to get more full. But if you don't change your behavior, just like any other, weight loss fad, so to speak, if you don't maintain the behaviors, or you don't learn from the experience, then you end up right back where you were before you started, and that doesn't really help anybody. Another thing that I think is important to know is that while this will significantly help you when it comes to how much food you consume, liquids are sort of a workaround in a negative way. And what I mean by that is, if you're on these drugs but you're still consuming a lot of alcohol, or you're consuming a lot of shakes, or you drink a lot of full sugar soda, that is not going to have the same effect. It might help the insulin response a little bit, but those things are so high glycemic that it can only do so much. And calorically, it's not going to give you that hunger satisfaction. So you can sort of completely ignore that benefit of the drug by consuming a lot of liquid calories. So if this is something you're thinking about doing, and again, consult with the doctor, you're going to need to either cut drinking significantly or stop altogether. And you're going to really need to consume low or no calorie sodas. Otherwise, if you don't modify that part of your behavior, that's a problem that you have, then the drugs are only going to do so much for you. And then when it comes to the side effects, people ask me, like, is it worth the trade-off for the side effects? And, I can't answer that for people. You kind of have to determine that for yourself. I've run into stories of people who have lost all their hair as a result of the drug. And I think it's a very rare thing, but it happens. And for some people, that's worth it. They don't care, especially, if you're a man and you're already losing your hair, then okay, not that big a deal. Now, is that causing other things within your system to create that hair loss that are problematic? Potentially. Again, which is why you'd want to work with a doctor through this stuff. But if you're a woman and you start to lose your hair, that could be a different animal, right? Like, that could be a lot more concerning depending on your own value system on these side effects. So you have to make that judgment call for yourself, but you need to really monitor these things carefully so you can make that judgment call. But my biggest point of advice, I'd say, is if you are in the obese range, if you're slightly overweight, different conversation, but if you're in the obese range, the health dangers of being obese and the problems that it causes on your system are probably going to be a lot worse than the majority of the potential side effects you might get from this drug. So if you're looking at sort of a pros and cons list, the con of remaining obese by not using this drug and not having the ability to change your behavior enough to do this, then the pro of taking this drug and getting unobese significantly outweighs all of those side effects. Now, again, this is a call you got to make for yourself, but in my opinion, the effects that being obese has on your health are significant and really, really, really problematic. Whereas if you can take this drug and encounter a handful of side effects for, anywhere from 4 to 9 months, but you're no longer obese, I think that trade-off generally is going to be worth it. Now, again, you have to make that call for yourself, right? I can't make that call for you. And the doctor can't really make that call for you, because you just need to be educated on all this. So, like I said in the beginning, I am generally for these drugs. And I'm generally for anything that's going to help people make significant strides in their health and to being a better version of themselves, understanding the potential risks that come with that. And then another thing, people will say, this is BS, but I've been in the industry for 20 years and I've worked with a lot of people, maybe 1,000 people at this point. I've seen people do all of the, quote unquote, right things and still struggle mightily to lose weight. And a lot of it is hormone related. Sometimes it's thyroid. I think people are pretty familiar with thyroid dysregulation at this point, but insulin sensitivity and ghrelin and leptin also play a huge role in these things. And the best way I've heard it described is when you take these drugs, it turns off the food noise. And people that have these dysregulation in all their hormones can't stop thinking about food or feeling hungry or salivating, and they're never satiated from what they eat. And it's from years of eating poorly, right? That's put these hormones in this position. But again, that might not even necessarily be their fault. And I've seen so many people try over years, and that I've worked with and I've tried to help, and even doing most of the right things, and still can't get the needle to move very much. And sometimes you think that's a failure on you as a coach, and that has happened to me before, sure. Like I haven't been able to get through to people, but I've seen a lot of instances where people are trying so hard and just can't break through and can't get their body to do what they want. And they get on these drugs, and it changes their life. They are able to control their hunger. They're able to ignore food. They can go to parties and not partake in things that are there, which is like unheard of psychologically for so many people. And it just turns off that food noise and re-regulates all these things that have been disrupted from your whole life, starting from childhood, that have dysregulated all these things. So please don't look at these drugs as thinking you're a weak person or you don't have the willpower to do things. Like, some of it might be out of your hands or so far gone that all the behavior change in the world can only do so much. And these things can absolutely help you. So please, take a look at these as a potential tool, and they're not going anywhere. They're getting better. They're becoming more ubiquitous. And overall, I'm a fan. You just need to know the side effects, and you need to do it under the supervision of a medical professional.